Hey guys, how's it going? Fate is getting a new game this September with Fate Samurai Remnant. From what we've seen, it's got some pretty fun looking gameplay and a decent variety of servants to fight with and against. We've got some familiar faces and some brand new ones as well, which means it's time to put on our speculatory glasses to try and figure out who these characters are. I'll say this, some of these are pretty obvious, if not flat out already known, and I think that's pretty intentional. It's also very possible that they hit us with the old bait and switch for the ones that are too obvious, but hey, that's what speculation is all about. Samurai Remnant has two different factions, servants summoned by a master and rogue servants. I don't have the context as to why the 7 additional rogue servants have been summoned, and quite frankly, I do not care. Whatever the in-game reasoning is will be cool, but the real reasoning is that it's an excuse to add more characters in this arc. Like seriously, the style for Samurai Remnant is amazing, and it fits the theme so perfectly that I wouldn't mind an even additional 7 more servants. At present, we don't have all of these servants revealed to us, so I'll go back later and talk about them in a separate video, but for now we're going to be focusing on the ones that we do have. We'll start with the master servants first, working our way down by class, and then do the same for the rogue servant. We have the names for some of these servants, so for the cases like that, we can talk about what their potential deal is. I've seen only a little bit of character speculation online, mostly for characters that are very obvious, so I'm kind of going into this with fresh eyes. So let's get started. Let's start with the Saber, the servant of our main character, Miyamoto Iori. Continuing the tried and true Fate tradition, a Saber in a Holy Grail war must have an antenna hair to communicate with their master. This person, because their gender is currently under debate, is a shrine priest or monk of some repute. The biggest tell of this coming from their outfit, which is white and adorned with jade. What is maybe the most interesting part of their given design is their sword and their noble phantasm animation. They appear to have a connection to both water and the divine, and the sword that they wield is almost certainly going to be revealed to be the Kusanagi given its appearance. The Kusanagi is one of Japan's 3 treasures along with the mirror, Yata no Kagami, and the jewel, Yasakani no Magatama. The original wielder of the Kusanagi no Sarugi was a figure who has a close association with the water and is actually a character that people have been requesting in Fate for some time. Susanoo, the sea and storm god. Honestly, they do give off the appearance of a deity with their attire, and are almost certainly going to be revealed to be female. Before people go full on aggravated about that, don't worry, we've got a lot of good male designs coming up soon. Susanoo is one of the most complex Japanese gods. He was originally a violent belligerent, causing endless problems in the heavens, but after joining the world of man, he warmed up to humanity and even began to protect them. He obtained the Kusanagi famously from slaying the 8-headed snake Orochi and taking the blade from its tail. I'm fairly confident in this prediction because it would just make so much sense, and would be the perfect setting to add such a desired character. Unlike Saber, we have much less to go off of with the Archer, aside from them being incredibly loyal, confirmed to be a male, and I would argue Chinese in origin given the attire. When I think of an archer who is loyal to their ruler hailing from China, I think of Hou Yi. This is probably just because I played too much Smite, but whatever. Hou Yi was an archer under the service of the legendary King Yao. At one point, the world had 10 suns, each of which would take their own turn rising. However, one day all 10 decided to come out at the same time, leading to massive devastation. Under King Yao's instruction, Hou Yi was sent to deal with them. He first tried negotiations, then intimidation, both of which proved fruitless. So, he began shooting the suns out of the sky with his bow. One by one they fell and turned into 3-legged crows, until there was just one left. And at his king's request, he spared it. From here, the story diverges, but with the limited knowledge we currently have, I'm going to assume that this rendition of Hou Yi did not go down the tyrant route. Which means this is the route where he became a famous monster hunter and then his wife became the moon. Bummer. My speculation as to why I believe this fits more or less ties to who has summoned him, a heroic appearing man named Chen Gong, which is terrifying. Joan of Arc Alter, aka Jalter, is the Lancer here, much to many people's annoyance. One day you will accept that Nasuverse rules are stupid and that by trying to justify them you look a fool every time. Goofy ass. I don't really have too much to say about the inclusion of Jalter other than it makes me curious to know what the deal is with her master. Servants, traditionally, if there is a lack of a catalyst, will answer the summon of an individual that has a similar vibe, for lack of a better words. And you can insert your joke about me talking about a Nasuverse rule after criticizing them here. What it means is that Jalter's master is someone who is persecuted and punished. Now, my crackpot theory on this is that Jalter's master was a survivor of the Shimabara Rebellion, the same rebellion that resulted in the death of Amakusa Shiro and the sweeping ban of Christianity. This would actually make him and Jalter perfect companions. I date-checked everything and it would fit, given that the Waxing Moon ritual, which is the setting for Samurai Remnant, takes place in 1651. This does raise the question though as to how Iori looks like that when at this time he should be a year out from 40. But that said, Musashi's a woman and there's Dart Chuff and Fox Loli running around, so whatever. Writer is almost certainly Takeda Shingen, and if not him, another member of the Takeda clan guaranteed. On this I can almost promise you. The reason for the confidence comes from the symbol placed upon his helmet, as it is the crest of the Takeda clan. I do not have time for an entire Behind the Servants episode here, and he certainly does warrant one if it is him, but for now know that Shingen was one of the major rivals of Oda Nobunaga. He was essentially the beating heart of the entire Takeda clan at the time. He was a master strategist in general, and despite being situated in poor terrain for his territory, was able to gain exceptional amounts of territory in his campaigns. For a time as well, he and Nobunaga were allied, but when it became obvious that Nobu planned to take all of Japan for himself, it was only up to Shingen to try and stop him. Despite all of this, he mysteriously died in a siege against the Oda clan. It is still not fully known what did him in, but he was found in his camp and there's a lack of concrete evidence to say what did it. The only real discrepancy is the all-black armor, given that we know what his actual armor looked like, but Fate has a tendency to make some light altercations, so who knows. We have no information on either caster. I will say the design of Caster's master is very reminiscent of an Onmyoji, and given the fact that casters are traditionally the most evil participants in every Holy Grail war, I am terrified for the future. Assassin is a hulking man with a massive snake motif. This gives us a handful of options. One that I have seen online is that this is Koga Saburo. If that name sounds familiar, it is because it is the supposed ancestor of Chiyome, who made a deal with a snake god eternally damning his children to have serpents as a trade for power. The real Saburo is more relatable. He was a man who was searching for his wife with his two older brothers, and his middle brother, jealous of Saburo's fame and prowess, and out of a desire for his brother's wife, betrayed him, trapping him in a cave after the wife had been found. With no other options, Saburo descended deeper into the cave and wandered into the underworld. When he finally emerged, he found that his appearance had taken the form of a giant snake. Wishing to return to normal, he sought the help of a Buddhist monk. The monk was actually a god in disguise, who turned him back into a man, and then Saburo reclaimed his wife and land from his brother. I think this is an interesting theory, but not the full story. I would imagine that if Saber is going to be Susanoo, then the game would be missing out to not include the Orochi in some regard. For that, I think this will be a combination servant of Saburo's body that is secretly being possessed by the spirit of the Orochi. Fate already has these two tied together, so seeing a way for Orochi himself to come through would be kinda sick. Our berserker is none other than Miyamoto Musashi. This was the character that they have been using as the poster girl, and for good reason. Everybody loves Musashi, and people that don't can't read, and have small thumbs, so fuck them. Most of you already know Musashi. Historically, he was a ronin who traveled Japan dueling people with his unorthodox fighting style until he killed Sasaki Kojiro, after which point he began seeking enlightenment and honing his sword skills further. What is most interesting about this Musashi is that we know that proper human history Musashi is male. We've seen his wrinkled old ass before. So this is the alternative Musashi. We were recently given confirmation in an interview with Nasu that this version of Musashi is post-Shimosa but pre-Lost Belt 5.2, so anyone who got their hopes up for a reversal of the Data Lost story, sorry. This makes me very curious to see how Musashi will interact with the main character Iori. Is this a timeline difference where her world's Iori was different, or will she recognize him as being her adopted son? We will just have to wait and see. The Rogue Saber bears a striking resemblance to a certain gamer Oni in Chaldea. In fact, the armor is almost exactly the same. That means that this servant has the potential to be one of two people. It's either Tomoe Gozen or Minamoto no Yoshinaka, aka Tomoe's husband. Both are prominent figures in the records of the Genpei War, the Tale of Heike. Tomoe was said to have had the strength of an Oni, noted for one time ripping a man's head from his body with just her bare hands to present to her lord. She was also a master archer. Yoshinaka was a member of the Minamoto clan and cousins to Minamoto no Yorimitsu and Ushiwakamaru, but fought against them in order to become the head of the Minamoto and destroy the Taira clan. While initially successful and succeeding in capturing the Emperor Go Shirakawa, he would later be hunted down and killed by the Minamoto. Records of how this happened vary. In the cases where Tomoe is present, he begs her to leave her, either so that she may survive and raise their child, or because he considered it shameful to die beside a woman. In other cases, he attempted to flee only to get stuck in mud and then killed. Regardless, the armor matches what we see Tomoe wear, so I imagine it has to have some relation. Excited to see which one it is. I'd like to see Yoshinaka because I want Tomoe to get her husband so they can be an E-couple in Valorant. Our rogue archer is Arjuna. Honestly, I'm very excited to see how they handle him here. We've seen how Fate Riders handle Karna without Arjuna and Apocrypha, and it made Karna out to be one of the coolest motherfuckers on the planet. Arjuna is a much more complicated character because he cares way more about that rivalry than Karna does, so putting him in a situation where it's just him will be kinda cool. Arjuna is an incredibly skilled warrior, despite how dirty FGO's kits have done to him, but he has a rough personality. I really don't care about how he wound up in 15th century Japan, I'm just interested in seeing his interactions with people. How will he handle being around a master who was adopted away from his family and is training to be a warrior who can protect others? Will this make him equate Iori as being similar to Karna? Well, we'll just have to see. Our rogue lancer is Ku, and might I say he is looking dashing in this style. I feel like Ku gets a raw deal in Fate because this dude is in like more than half of the canon Holy Grail wars. I'm fine with it, Ku's cool. If anything, I'm just surprised he hasn't been given a green card yet because it seems like he's been living in Japan for centuries. Alright, on to my favorite of the batch, the dart chuffin', word bluffin', man stuffin', tail fluffin', honey muffin, Tamamo Arya. A member of the Tamamo 9, Tamamo Arya is considered by the original Tamamo to be the most mysterious. Her profile says that she uses her charm and frivolous speaking to seduce men. She appears in this tiny form for a handful of reasons. One is that this is what makes her class as a rider easier. Arya has no proper mount, and instead prefers to ride on people. Whether this is meant to be taken in the way that a parrot rides atop a shoulder, or if she's been taking notes from Maeve is to be seen. But regardless of these, the big-ass sword on her back is going to make moving around a pain. It does mention that it is done for transportation, so we should keep that in mind. By her nature, being described as mysterious, it is hard to make any assumptions about what her true personality is like. Where Kat is a crystallization of Tamamo's purity, and we can assume Vitch is something like a crystallization of her manners or etiquette, hence being a perfect, beautiful secretary, we have to figure out what aspect of Tamamo Arya is. It's possible that Arya is meant to be Tamamo's crystallized allure, and before you suss me for saying that, I'm taking this from the brief description that we were given, mixed with her name. Aria, and aria is a type of operatic song that is long and accompanied by a singular voice. This could possibly be symbolic of something like a siren luring people over to her side so they are more easily manipulated. Whether this is accurate is to be seen, but she is still very throwable regardless. Both the rogue caster and the assassin are unknown. On to our final servant, we have the rogue berserker. I'm going to say that this is 100%, no doubt in my mind, Samson. His body is huge and muscular, and he bears the chains and cuffs of the enslaved. Most notably, however, is his hair, which drapes down his back and onto the floor where it trails behind him like a cape. Samson was one of the final judges of the Israelites before they formed a monarchy, and was a Nazirite who gained immense strength from his vows to God. The Nazirite vow was that a person taking the vow was to avoid wine and products of grapes, avoid corpses and graves even with loved ones to remain pure, and to not cut their hair. Samson was a force of nature with his flowing locks, famously slaying a lion barehanded and also defeating an entire army with his only weapon being a donkey's jawbone. However, he would be betrayed by his lover Delilah, and his hair would be cut in his sleep, allowing him to be captured as he was now without his strength. He was then enslaved by the Philistines, blinded, and made to work at a mill. At one point, he was transported to a temple of Dagon, where he asked to take a rest against a pillar. In other tellings of the story, he was chained to a set of pillars in the temple to be humiliated, and in others further, he grasped two pillars of the temple with both hands. Regardless of how he was presented, he says a prayer to God who grants him his strength for just a moment as he crushes the pillars, causing the entire temple to crumble on top of him with all members of the Philistine government within it. In Samurai Remnant, he has pledged his loyalty to Musashi's master, but in that same breath, he is a classical berserker, one who has lost his sanity because of his class. If I had to take a stab at how this plays out into the story, he will be one of our first targets to fight, and it'll be a great way to introduce how knowing names gives you an advantage in the Holy Grail War. I'd wager that we either go to kill him but don't know anything about the biblical Samson, or Jalter and her master, who I'm theorizing is Catholic, teams up with us to kill him because they would be able to identify his weakness. Anyway, that's all just me spitballing. That's who we've got so far. I am neglecting to mention that we are not so subtly told that Gilgamesh is here, but I think he's just going to be relegated to a shopkeeper this time around, and you all know Gil already, so whatever. We've got 2 months or so before the release, and I'm super excited for it. Let me know who you think these characters with unknown names are down below. Check my links for my Discord, Twitch, and Twitter. Maybe I should specify this here that this is not sponsored, but if Tight Moon ever wants to pay tithes to the Goat Man, I'm more than willing to cooperate. Anyway, keep your chin up, lads. Peace.